Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 28 of the ES335 build, and in this episode we're going to take a break from working on the neck and cut the neck pocket into the body. Okay, so we're getting into this neck build quite nicely now, but as I mentioned at the back end of last episode, there's not much more I can do at this stage until I've got the neck tenon cut, and I can't realistically cut the neck tenon until I've got the neck pocket cut in the body. So we'll get the body back on the bench so we can start to work out how we're going to go about cutting this neck pocket. Now the problem we've got is twofold. This is an arch top, it's got an arch back, so it wobbles all over the place. But also I can't lay a template flat on top of the guitar because it's got this big hump in the middle. So that means we're going to have to find some way of both holding it steady and holding a template at the right angle. Now luckily we've kind of addressed this problem already when we were cutting the channels for the binding. So my initial thoughts are I'm going to get that jig back onto the table and we'll work out a way of adapting that so that it can hold the template over the front part of the body at the right angle so we can cut our neck pocket. Okay, so we'll sit this back in its jig. Now I think I adapted this to work the other way around, so we might have to, oh no, it sits in nicely. So my thought process now is if I add some blocks kind of here and here that sit to the right height, I could also do some at the front so that I can then fasten a flat piece of MDF on as close as I can get it to the top of the body whilst being at the right angle. So if I just demonstrate with this offcut of MDF, I could actually have it sat up so it's relatively close, so I don't have to use a really long route of it to get to the bottom of the neck pocket. I can also cut the template out in the area with the most arch in it, because I only realistically need something I can get my router on, kind of this area. So I'll do some measuring up and I'll get back to you when I've got a bit more of a plan. Okay, so this is what I've come up with. I've just cut some blocks here. They're all exactly the same height, 64mm. So I'm going to secure those to the baseboard, probably just with a bit of super glue. That's all we need, I think, for this. And then I've prepared this bit of board just by kind of very roughly cutting out a notch in it so that this will sit on top of those blocks like that. And once I set this up properly, I'll just measure at various intervals around here and just make sure that it is absolutely set at the right height. And then once this is all set up properly, I can then cut the neck pocket shape out of here. So we've got a template to route with. Okay, so I've just stuck those on with a bit of super glue, and they're solid enough for what we need. I'm not relying on any kind of glue bond on this. I'm going to clamp it in position, so these are literally just to space the template from the top of the body. I've also drawn the centre line back in on the body because it had disappeared, and I've done a bit of marking out on my little template. So I've marked out where I want my neck pocket to sit in that. On the drawing it showed the neck tenon to be about 60mm long. I've extended that to 75mm just to give me a little bit more meat on the tenon. It'll mean it'll extend back further into the neck pickup cavity, but that's, it's really not a problem at all. It will just mean that the tenon on the neck will have to be notched to accommodate that. But that's all fine. So the next thing I want to do is to get this clamped roughly into position. And I'm going to clamp that actually to the bench as well, just to hold it all really nice and firm. So that's lined up on the centre lines. Now the problem I might have is because this bit of the template which I'm lining up onto the centre line isn't actually that long anymore, it makes it a little bit inaccurate. But what I've done is I've put two little marks on here, and I'll bring you in closer to show you this when we do it in more detail. But I've put two marks equally spaced from the centre line on this edge of the template, and we can then measure back to the centre line right at the end of the body, and in theory those measurements should be exactly the same, which will mean that this template is square onto that centre line, so we'll get a good accurate cut. But before I do that, I just want to check that this is actually sitting square to the body in this jig. And that's level to within about 1/2 mil, but you've got to bear in mind that that's level to within 1/2 mil at these extremities, so we're only routing 40 mil in the middle, so that discrepancy will be minimised in the area where we're actually going to be routing. Either way, 1/2 millimetre, I would say that's within specification. Right, so with those couple of little checks done, it's now time to cut out for the neck pocket. And I'm just going to do this the way I would always go about it. Rough it out on the bandsaw and then trim it up with the flush trim bit on the router. Okay, so I've just prepared a few little bits of MDF. They've all got one very straight edge, and these two have got a perfect 90-degree angle sanded onto them. And I'm just going to attach them in the appropriate position with some super glue and masking tape. And we can now just use that as a guide for our router with a flush trim bit in, and we're good to go. Okay, so with that cut, just time to kind of check how accurate it is. And that is very, very parallel. I'm very happy with that. It's ever so slightly narrower than spec. It's actually at 39 mil rather than 40. Doesn't really matter hugely, but the most important thing is it is very parallel along its length. So I'm really happy that that is good enough for what we need. So I'm just going to mark the centre line back in here. And that's pretty much ready for use. Okay, so that's the template completed. And in theory, that should just line up with the front face of the body and then align on the centre lines. So with that done, I'm just going to mark the approximate position of the neck pocket, and then I'm going to take a 35 mil Forstner bit and just hog out the waste working from that centre line, and that should leave me about 2 mil of material either side of that I need to clean out. So get this to the drill press. Okay, so there's the bulk of the waste drilled out. So now it's just a case of setting this template up properly, triple checking that it's in the right position, and then taking the small trim router and very slowly but surely kind of taking away the rest of this waste material. I'm going to set it up on the other side of the bench that I normally work from, simply because it will give me a little bit more room to work with this hanging over the bench to the extent that it's going to be. Right, so I've set this template up now. It's on the centre line at the front there, and I've super glued and masking taped this rule along the centre line of the template, and that matches perfectly with the centre line back there. So I've kind of extended that centre line on the template as far back as it'll go with this rule, and that's given me a great deal more accuracy. Of course, if this is ever so slightly out, and it will only be very fractional if anything, you can always adjust the position of your bridge and tailpiece to accommodate that. Hopefully it won't come to that, but it's always there in case you need it. Okay, we'll get this rule off and then we can start the routing. Okay, and there we have the neck pocket cut. Really happy with the way that's gone. It's cut nice and cleanly. There's a little bit of scorching in there. This maple is really hard, but it's cut really cleanly. So yeah, no problem there at all. So while that may not seem like we've made a huge amount of progress there, that is kind of a big job done and out of the way, and it's also kind of one of the more risky operations that we've got left to do. So I'm happy that I've been able to do that without causing any damage or any problems. So that's amazing. Really, really pleased with that. So next up is we can get the neck back into play, and we can start to kind of work out the angle this neck needs to go in at and start cutting the tenon. However, that's way too much content for this episode, so I'm going to leave that till next time. So as always, like if you've liked, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.